Good evening, everyone. Sorry, I've been a little under the weather, so trying to get back here. So today we're going to be talking about good old Canada, our neighbor up to the north. Obviously, Canada's been in the news a lot for most of the current administration so far. But the new Prime Minister visited the White House today, as I'm sure y'all are aware. And I thought it was a little contentious. I thought the president kind of, he's just being who he is. But I guess I thought he could have been a little bit more diplomatic. We know how he feels about our good old neighbors to the north, but you know how the media is. They're going to try to goad him into saying something, and I'm not saying it worked, but he wasn't shying away from answering those type of questions, which kind of made me cringe a little bit, because I'm like, ugh, the guy's sitting right there. Obviously the new prime minister is what we would call probably a leftist. He's a progressive, very progressive. And so even though initially President Trump had nice things to say about him and all this other stuff, even though I believe they wanted the other candidate to win, once they got done, once the media kind of started asking questions, that's kind of when it kind of like got a little awkward. I'll use that. It got a little awkward. And I'm sorry, y'all, the camera's just all ate up. And so it got a little awkward. And I don't know. Obviously, Canada is not going to be giving up their provinces to the United States. That's obvious. And I guess that's one subject that me and the president diverge on. Is like, yeah, I get that, you and Prime Minister Trudeau didn't get along, and I get that we have a deficit with them. I get it. I get that we do supply them with a lot, and they rely on our military quite a bit. I get all of that. I never did like, him saying, Canada is going to be, our 51st state. No, that's not going to happen. Now, in saying all that, and of course Canada's not going to give up their territory. Of course not. Why would they? And we wouldn't either. But we do, and prayerfully we will fix the tariff issues and the trade issues. I think they'll be able to fix that. But the thing that's really kind of popping off in the news is, Alberta. Now, the state of Alberta is probably the most conservative state in Canada, and they're not happy with the election. They were rooting for the other guy, and Canada has this like resource agreement, whatever you want to call it, that all the states or provinces, whatever they want to call it, share resources with I guess everybody else or whatever. And from the chart I saw, Alberta doesn't gain anything. Alberta or some of the western provinces don't gain anything, but all the eastern provinces are the ones gaining all that. And Alberta is rich in resources, especially oil. So Alberta's upset that the burden is not being shared evenly across the board. And according to the chart, Alberta is doing the most. Out of all the provinces, Alberta's doing the most. Alberta's doing the most. And they're tired of it, and I don't blame them. And so now the election has come and gone, and they've elected a new prime minister that's not necessarily going to be for Alberta and probably keep the status quo, if not make it worse. Alberta's thinking about doing a referendum to secede. And in all honesty, I'm for them. If Canada's not for making things fair and making things not equitable, but equal amongst all the provinces, where Alberta's given so much, but they're getting very little in return from the other areas, then you have a right to secede, just like states have a right to secede here in the United States. Now, again, what's the reality of secession? Probably low. But I'm all for it. I believe if Alberta thinks that they're not being treated fairly, that they need to do something to get the government to, make things more fair. And if they still don't do it, then they have a right to secede. First and foremost, probably form their own country and potentially join the United States, which I would love to see. I would love to see that. Same with Greenland. Do I think it's probably going to happen? Probably not. But and even with Greenland, I think Greenland has a better possibility of becoming its own country than becoming a part of the United States. And I think we could work with that. I think even though would want to make Greenland a state or a territory, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think Denmark's going to allow it. But if they do allow independence, then I think we can make a deal. We have a base there, but I think we can make it, much more significant. And so, we'll see. I think this thing in Alberta is something to keep an eye on. I think it just like the Scottish in the UK, I think it just comes a time where, when you're in the UK's case, a union between England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, it's precarious. But when you have a country that doesn't want to be a part anymore, I think they have a right to leave. And so I just think Alberta, being a much more conservative province, has every right to feel that they're not being treated fairly, and they're not being treated fairly from all the information I've seen, that they have a right to do a referendum and leave, and I think they should. Now, whether they join the United States or not is irrelevant, but if they do, great. If they don't, that's fine. They're their own country, and then we could do an absolute bang-up trade deal with them. So we'll see. It could be something exciting to see, and it could be something really exciting to see. So we'll see how it goes. And I've been watching a couple of videos, and the Canadian law is a little different than American law, obviously. So the one issue, or another issue, is that they call them First Nation, but the native Canadians, or First Nations, they call them First Nation people, are upset. Some of them are upset because they feel that they are going to lose out. But no, they're not going to lose out, because the Canadian Constitution says even if a province were to leave, they can't do it without the First Nation, and the First Nation can't do it without the province. So those laws are irregardless. So I'm not sure why some of the First Nation folk are concerned, because either way, they're going to be in the mix. The Canadians treat their natives much better than we treat ours. That's just the truth. They treat them much better. So we'll see how it all works out. I'm rooting for Alberta. I think, if they choose that they want to do a referendum and leave, then let them leave. It's the will of the people. So, I'm not sure about Prime Minister Carney, I think his name is. I think he's a triple citizen, I believe. I know he's a citizen of the UK and of Canada. I can't remember the third country. But he's relatively new to Canada. I think he's been living in England. And so, I guess he took an opportunity and he won. But again, he's definitely on the left. A lot of people are accusing him of being a globalist, which he might be. But it's the same old in Canada. Nothing changed. They basically grabbed somebody that was just like the last three prime ministers. So it is what it is. I personally think that we'll, get everything straight with Canada as far as trade is concerned. If the Canadians want a deal, I think we'll be okay in that. Same with Mexico. I think that come on. Oh, okay, I was gonna let it get over, but okay. Y'all know I'm driving, so I'm trying to keep from getting hit up anyhow. Yeah, so we'll see how it goes. I hope all these tariffs work out with all these countries. I'm sure that most of them will. Again, I'm not necessarily a fan of the regular tariffs. I'm definitely a fan of reciprocal. Definitely a fan of that. So I'm all for the reciprocal. That other stuff, I think he could have waited on that. But it is what it is. So yeah, I just hopped on here to talk a little bit about Canada and the things going on with Alberta. I think Alberta needs to be taken more seriously. I think the Canadian government needs to take more seriously the contributions Alberta is giving to the country, much more than any other country in Canada, by far, by a whole lot. And I think, honestly, that the Canadian government is exploiting Alberta for its resources. And so I think Alberta has every right to be upset. I think that Alberta has every right to try this referendum and see if it works. And I think they should, because the Canadian government's not taking them seriously. So, hey, it's their right to do that, just like it's still the right of a state to secede from the Union. Still has that right. Now, it's a very long and complicated process, but it's still there. But again, the Canadian government's a little bit more socialist in nature, not a little less of a republic than we are. They're a little bit more socialist in nature, and so obviously Canadian government runs a little differently. So yeah, I mean, it's just kind of a weird situation going on with Canada right now, and hopefully everything will work out for the good for both countries. And so I'm sure they'll all work it out. I think sometimes the president can be a little bit more diplomatic in how he answers the media's questions, or how he kind of makes his comments when there's some tension between our two countries for the comments that you made, and then the new prime minister makes it a point not too long after he gets elected to come see about you. And sometimes it's just best not to make comments like that when the gentleman is sitting right next to you. Sometimes it's just best to be a little bit more diplomatic and that But that's not the president. That's what he's got Rubio for. Rubio's a diplomatic guy. The president just says what he thinks. And sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes not so good. Like I said, the little thing they had in the Oval Office was kind of cringe at some points. I'm like, do you really need to say that right now? And of course, the media is going to exploit it because they don't like him. But you don't fall for the trap. You know that's what they're going to do. So you stay diplomatic. But anyways, at least you know what you're getting with the president. And so, yeah. So that's all we're talking about today. We're going to get a little update on Canada. And Prime Minister came by the White House. And the conversation started all right, but it kind of ended a little cringy. And I didn't see his little press conference afterwards. I'm sure he went after the president. I don't think he was being disrespectful, but he went after him. Because he said it right there, Canada's, obviously that's non-negotiable as far as territory, which is perfectly understandable. Any country that would be non-negotiable. So that's what you're supposed to say. And I'm sure President Trump knew he was going to say that, and from what I saw, President Trump's like, okay, I expect you to say that. So yeah, hopefully everything will work out between us and the Canadians, and root for Alberta. I'm really rooting for Alberta. It's not that I want to see Canada get all discombobulated and split apart. Heck, Quebec's been trying to leave Canada for decades. So I don't want to hear nothing from folks who are like, oh, well, you're just out to see Canada destroyed. No, Quebec's been trying to leave Canada for decades. They've had secessionist movements for decades. So I don't even want to hear all that. And I was all for Quebec doing their thing. They're the only province that speaks French. So they're already different. So yeah, it's just it's just kind of a weird situation that we find ourselves in, and they find themselves in. And I know a lot of people aren't happy with the new Canadian government, but hey, it is what it is. So we just have to learn to deal with who we got. So President Trump's going to have to deal with him, make a deal with him, try to get trade back, to obviously a level playing field. And I'm sure Canada will be open to making a deal. I'm sure they will. Because in the end, we don't need anything from Canada. We really don't. Even though I believe Canada is our largest trading partner, and I believe the Prime Minister did bring that up. We don't necessarily need anything from Canada. Canada doesn't necessarily provide us things that we absolutely need, that we can't get from ourselves or from somewhere else. But the president is right. The United States is the market everybody wants to be in. So we are in the driver's seat. We're the ones holding all the cards. And the president knows it, and all these other countries know it, and Canada knows it too. We are the market that everybody wants to be in, that everybody wants to be a part of, that everybody wants a piece of. That's just the facts. That's just the truth. Now, the way President Trump puts it, it doesn't sound quite as nice. He's a little bit, obviously, much more blunt about it, but he's correct. Everybody wants a piece of the American market. Everybody, no matter who you are. So people are going to make deals. And we know we're in the driver's seat. We're the ones holding all the cards. Now, whether we would have done it with tariffs like we're doing, or we would have done it another way, either way, we're in the driver's seat. And the president knows it, and everybody else knows it. So I think the deals will get done. I think most of the countries will be getting deals done. We have been taken advantage of, and we were taken advantage of, and it is time out for all that. It's time out for everybody taking advantage of us. That's why I say I'm a fan of the reciprocal tariffs. Not necessarily a fan of all these other ones, but definitely a fan of reciprocal. That's only fair. And so, but we'll see. I think it'll all work itself out. And so, we'll see how it all goes with our neighbors to the north. We'll see how it all goes. Anyways, that's all I'm going to talk about on today. And again, I apologize. I've been sick the last couple of days, and so try to get another one out to you tomorrow. But until then, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Please share if you enjoy the content. If you feel that somebody else would enjoy it, or if you feel that you're getting something out of any of my videos, please share. Know that I appreciate each and every one that likes and subscribes and leaves a comment. If you leave a comment, be respectful. That's all I'm going to say. I don't have a problem with you disagreeing with me. That's cool. That's cool. But there's no place for disrespect. And so I ain't got to put up with that. So be respectful. And like I said, just grateful for anybody who takes the time to watch. Just grateful. So until next time, God bless you.